She made a vow to bring her closest friend back home. The airline attempted to prevent her from doing so, and what transpired next left everyone in utter disbelief. Naomi Brooks had proudly served in uniform for 12 years, enduring deployments that challenged every aspect of her mind, body, and spirit. Yet, nothing had ever burdened her as heavily as this moment did. She was tasked with escorting her dearest friend home. Corporal Devin Hayes was not meant to be resting in that flag-covered coffin. He was supposed to be playfully teasing her about his superior poker skills, engaging in friendly arguments over which diner in San Diego served the finest breakfast, or telling her that she took life far too seriously. However, war had other intentions. One moment, they were side by side, pushing through their final mission abroad. The next, he was gone. Before they loaded his body onto the transport, she made a solemn promise to his mother that she would ensure he returned home, not as a faceless statistic, but as a beloved friend. As she stepped into the bustling terminal at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, her uniform crisp and her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, Naomi didn't focus on cacophony of noise or the throngs of travelers surrounding her. Her sole objective was to get Devin back to Wichita, Kansas, where his family awaited him, broken yet holding on. Naomi had fulfilled her responsibilities through official military channels. Military transport had brought them stateside, and now commercial airlines would carry them the rest of the way. She had all the necessary paperwork, the clearance, and everything was organized. Yet, still, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. Something felt amiss. She checked her ticket. Gate B-17, with a departure in 90 minutes, ample time. Adjusting her grip on her bag, she made her way toward the gate, her eyes flitting to the tarmac beyond the large windows. The cargo hold of her aircraft was open, but she couldn't yet see Devin's casket. That was to be expected. The escorting process rarely encountered issues. Rarely. Upon reaching the gate, the airline agent behind the desk barely acknowledged her, continuing a conversation with a colleague. Naomi stood there for a moment, waiting, until the agent finally sighed and turned her attention to her. "Can I assist you?" "I'm Sergeant Naomi Brooks, escorting Corporal Devin Hayes to Wichita." She handed over her paperwork, her voice unwavering. "I just need to confirm the procedure for once we land." The agent frowned, flipping through the documents with a puzzled expression. She clicked a few keys on her computer, squinted at the screen, and then sighed again, this time with an emotion Naomi couldn't quite identify. "That's actually going to be a problem," the woman stated. Naomi's jaw clenched. "What kind of problem?" "Your layover in Dallas. Our policy does not permit escorts to remain with the casket during transfers. You'll have to take a separate flight from the remains." Her heartbeat raced in her chest. No, that's not happening. She wasn't leaving Devin alone. She had made a promise, but the agent seemed indifferent. Naomi blinked, attempting to comprehend what she had just heard. "I'm sorry, what?" The gate agent exhaled sharply, as if already fatigued by this discussion. "Our policy does not allow escorts to stay with remains during transfers at certain layover locations," she reiterated. "You will be placed on a separate connecting flight to Wichita while the casket continues on its planned route." Naomi's grip tightened on her duffel strap. "No, absolutely not. That's not an option." Her voice remained steady but firm. "I'm his escort. I stay with him." The woman shook her head, clicking through her computer screen. "I understand, Sergeant Brooks, but it's out of my control. You'll rejoin the remains in Wichita. I'm not meeting him there. I'm bringing him there. That's my duty." Naomi could feel the tension rising in her voice, but she didn't care. "I have authorization, military escort clearance, that should supersede any policy." "It doesn't," the woman interrupted. "I don't make the rules. You'll have to adhere to airline procedures like everyone else." Naomi clenched her jaw. She had dealt with bureaucratic red tape before. Cold, detached policies crafted by individuals who had never been in a combat zone, never folded a flag, never knocked on a door to deliver the heartbreaking news that someone's son would not be returning home. She inhaled sharply. "I need to speak with a supervisor." The agent rolled her eyes. "They'll tell you the same thing." "Then let them tell me." With an exaggerated sigh, the woman grabbed her radio and mumbled something into it. Naomi stepped back, her pulse pounding in her ears. This was not happening. She had carried Devon out of that last mission. She had spoken to his mother, looked into her hollow eyes, and promised that her son wouldn't be alone for a single moment of his journey home. And now, some airline policy was threatening to take that away. "Excuse me, miss." Naomi turned at the voice. An older man had risen from his seat nearby, a Vietnam veteran. She recognized the insignia on his hat immediately. Deep lines etched into his face revealed an expression that suggested he had heard enough. "What's the issue here?" he asked, his voice grave yet steady. Before Naomi could respond, the gate agent interjected, "Sir, this is a private matter." The veteran's gaze remained fixed on Naomi. "Are you a military escort?" "Yes, sir," Naomi replied. "And they won't allow you to stay with him?" "No, sir." A muscle twitched in his jaw, and then, without another word, he turned to the gate agent and declared, "That's unacceptable." Before the agent could respond, another voice joined in, a woman clutching a folded flag in her lap. She had been listening intently and had something to say. The woman with the folded flag didn't hesitate. She stood up, pressing the fabric tightly against her chest, as though it was the only thing keeping her standing. A widow. Naomi recognized it before she even spoke. "My husband died in Iraq," the woman stated, her voice quiet but resolute. "When they brought him home, a soldier just like her stayed with him the entire way. Do you know what that meant to me? To my children?" Her eyes flicked to the gate agent. "You don't separate a fallen soldier from their escort. You simply don't." The agent's expression faltered, but she remained silent. Naomi swallowed hard. She didn't want to create a scene. She wanted to fulfill her duty. However, the moment the veteran and the widow spoke up, other passengers began to listen. Heads turned, and a murmur spread through the gate area. "She's military," someone remarked. "Why aren't they letting her do her job?" "That's disgraceful," another voice added. "This shouldn't even be a debate." Naomi barely had time to absorb the growing attention before a tall man in a business suit rose from his chair. "I travel for work every week," he stated. "I've seen airlines bend over backwards for celebrities and politicians. You're telling me they can't make an exception for this?" The gate agent's face flushed. "Sir, this is company policy." "This is a soldier bringing another soldier home," the veteran interjected, his voice sharper and louder now. "That means something to people like me, and to people like her." He gestured to the widow and to every single person who had ever served. A few people applauded. Others nodded in agreement. The murmur grew louder. The gate agent shifted, clearly uncomfortable now. She reached for her radio again, muttering something Naomi couldn't decipher. But before she could say anything else, a new voice sliced through the tension like a knife. "This is your captain speaking. Can Sergeant Brooks please come to the podium?" Silence enveloped the gate area. Naomi's stomach tightened. Had the pilot been listening? She exhaled slowly, adjusting her duffel strap before stepping forward. Whatever happened next, she was not backing down. Naomi moved forward, the weight of 100 eyes bearing down on her. The crowd had fallen silent, their anger replaced by curiosity, perhaps even hope. Had the pilot been attentive this entire time? The gate agent looked just as surprised as Naomi felt. She hesitated, then clicked her radio again. "Captain, this is—" "I heard everything," the voice interrupted, smooth but authoritative. "Sergeant Brooks, come to the desk, please." Naomi didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the counter, her jaw clenched and shoulders squared. The gate agent stepped aside, suddenly uncertain of herself. A moment later, a tall man in his late 50s emerged from the jet bridge, still in his pilot's uniform. His silver hair was neatly combed, and the airline insignia was pinned to his chest. However, it wasn't his appearance that struck Naomi. It was the way he looked at her, as if he understood her plight. He stopped in front of her and extended his hand. "Sergeant Brooks." She shook it, her grip firm. "Captain," he nodded, then turned toward the gate agent. His expression remained unchanged, but his next words carried a quiet authority that left no room for argument. "This soldier is staying with her comrade." The gate agent's mouth opened and then closed. "Captain, I just explained to her that." "I know what you explained," he interrupted. I also know that the airline has made exceptions before. I am fully aware that it is well within my authority to request one right now." His gaze sharpened. "And I am requesting one." A moment of silence passed. The agent shifted uncomfortably. "I'd need approval from you." "You have it," he interjected. "I just spoke with corporate. They will make it work." Naomi's chest tightened with relief and gratitude, an overwhelming mix of emotions. She had been prepared to fight this all the way, but now she didn't have to. The widow exhaled softly, whispering, "Thank God." The veteran, still standing, crossed his arms with a satisfied grunt. "That's more like it," he remarked. The business traveler gave a slow nod. About time someone had some sense. The pilot turned back to Naomi. "You will stay with him, Sergeant, every step of the way." She swallowed hard. "Thank you, sir." He nodded once, then glanced around at the crowd. His eyes landed on the widow, the flag still clutched to her chest. Something passed between them, something unspoken. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared back into the jet bridge. The gate agent still looked rattled, but she didn't argue. She tapped a few keys on her keyboard, and then handed Naomi's paperwork back. "You're all set." Naomi accepted it without a word, gripping it tightly. However, she knew this wasn't over yet. Naomi should have felt relief. The captain had made his decision, the passengers were on her side, and the airline had granted its approval. Yet the gate agent still seemed unwilling to let it go. Naomi caught the flicker of irritation on the agent's face as she typed something into her computer, her jaw tight. It wasn't just policy anymore, it was personal. The agent didn't appreciate being challenged, especially not in front of a crowd. "Your seat has been reassigned," the woman stated, not bothering to look up. Naomi's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, reassigned?" "You were originally in 14C. You've been moved to the last row." A ripple of tension coursed through the waiting area. The Vietnam veteran let out a slow, measured breath, observing the exchange like a man who had witnessed this game played before. Naomi clenched her jaw. They couldn't keep her off the flight, but they could certainly make it difficult. She could fight it, push back, or call the captain again, but the flight was boarding soon, and Devin was already on that plane, waiting. She inhaled through her nose, deciding to pick her battles. This one wasn't worth it. "Fine." She accepted the boarding pass without another word. The gate agent smirked, but her expression faded when the business traveler from earlier stepped forward. "Actually, that seat's taken," he said, sliding his own boarding pass onto the counter. "She can have mine, first class, 3A. Naomi's eyes widened. "You don't have to do that." "I do," he interrupted. "Take it." The gate agent opened her mouth, then closed it, her cheeks reddening. She scanned the pass with a curt nod. "Fine, it's done." The business traveler turned to Naomi and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You get him home, Sergeant." Naomi swallowed the lump forming in her throat. "I will." Without waiting for the gate agent to say anything else, she walked past her onto the jet bridge and into the plane. But she wasn't the only one boarding with purpose. As Naomi stepped onto the aircraft, she felt the weight of the moment settle in. She had fought her way here, not just for herself, but for Devin, for his mother waiting on the other end of this flight, and for every soldier who had never returned home. She moved toward her new seat in first class, still astonished by the business traveler's quiet act of defiance, the kindness of strangers, and the way people had stood up when it truly mattered. But just as she reached her row, she observed something out of the ordinary. The pilot was positioned at the front of the aircraft, not inside the cockpit, nor was he conducting his pre-flight inspections. Instead, he stood patiently. The whispers began the instant passengers noticed his presence. A flight attendant approached him with caution, but he gestured for her to step back. Then, as the final passengers settled into their seats, he took a deliberate step forward and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice calm and steady over the intercom. "Before we embark on our journey, I would like to take a moment to recognize someone aboard this flight." Naomi felt a tightening sensation in her stomach. "She wouldn't seek acknowledgement, and I doubt she desires it," he continued, scanning the cabin. "But she truly deserves it." He pointed toward Naomi. Sergeant Brooks is accompanying Corporal Devin Hayes back to his home. She made a promise to his family that she would ensure he arrived safely, and she is fulfilling that commitment. A profound silence enveloped the aircraft, and then, one by one, passengers began to applaud. At first, Naomi remained motionless, frozen in place as she tried to comprehend the unfolding situation. The Vietnam veteran and coach was the first to rise, clapping the loudest. A widow wiped her tears and joined the applause, followed by more hands and voices. Some passengers simply placed their hands over their hearts. Naomi swallowed hard, feeling overwhelmed. She was unaccustomed to such attention, to people recognizing her, to people genuinely caring. The pilot nodded at her once before retreating back into the cockpit. Naomi exhaled shakily. The gate agent had attempted to belittle her, but in this moment, surrounded by individuals who understood, she had never felt more empowered. The plane ascended smoothly into the sky as Naomi gazed out the window, the heaviness in her chest finally beginning to ease. She kept one hand resting on her duffel bag, feeling the fabric beneath her fingers as if it were an anchor she didn't require. She didn't seek gratitude or applause. She simply needed to bring Devin home. A flight attendant approached her quietly, kneeling beside her seat. "Ma'am, we want to present you with something," she said. Naomi turned in surprise as the woman extended a small tray. On it lay a neatly folded napkin, with a set of pilot's wings resting on top. "The captain wanted you to have these." The attendant spoke softly. "He mentioned that he doesn't typically distribute them, but he believes you've earned them more than anyone else." Naomi stared at the wings, her throat tightening. She reached out, gliding her fingers over the smooth metal before enclosing her palm around them. "Thank you," she whispered. The attendant offered her a gentle nod before standing and leaving Naomi alone with her thoughts. She closed her eyes, fatigue washing over her. The past 24 hours had been an unexpected struggle, but as she sat there, surrounded by strangers who refused to let her endure this alone, she came to a realization. Honor was not merely a word. It wasn't just a uniform, a salute, or a folded flag. It resided in the way people showed up and how they stood firm when something was amiss, in the manner a veteran continued to fight for respect long after his own war had concluded, in the way a widow bore the burden of sacrifice in her hands, in how a pilot raised his voice when others attempted to silence her, and in how a businessman, with nothing to gain, relinquished his seat without hesitation. Naomi glanced down at the wings in her hand, her grip tightening. She would keep them, not for herself, but for Devin. The plane landed in Wichita hours later. As Naomi disembarked, she spotted the Hayes family waiting just beyond security. Devin's mother clutched a tissue in her hands, her eyes red yet resolute as she awaited her son. Naomi stood taller, adjusted her uniform, and took the first step forward because promises were not merely spoken. They were fulfilled. Honor those who serve. If this narrative resonated with you, please share it, and let their sacrifices be remembered.